Hey, how you doing? So what I'm going to do this week is since we don't have a presenter this week, I'm going to put up some videos, some comments on the readings that we have, and they'll be in the normal discussion area. And so that's probably where you found this one, in fact. And so what I'm asking you to do is to chime in the comments on this area about anything that you see in the readings or anything that I've said, or respond to each other, or whatever you'd like on that. The purpose of all of these, as I mentioned last week, is to think about the relationship between ethics, epistemology, and social philosophy. And that's certainly why I chose the thinkers that I did this week. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up three separate videos, one on each of Comte, Mill, and Marx, and talk a little bit about each of those as offering us different kinds of solutions or different kinds of approaches, I suppose, to the issue of the relationship between those three. So that's the plan for the next little while here. So I want to start with Auguste Comte. We don't read a lot of Comte, certainly in philosophy. He might get mentioned in a course in 19th century philosophy, maybe in a course in philosophy of science or philosophy of social science or something like that. But, Comte is rather important, certainly as a kind of historical figure within the history of the development of scientific theory. And he's important for, I guess, one major reason, and that is the clearest articulation of what we might call positivism, what certainly he called positivism and what gets called positivism after his time. Comte is the one who coined the term sociology. I mean, that's where we get that word from. And what's interesting is to think about how that fits into his notion of positivism. So what I want to do here is talk a little bit about his what he thought or what he meant by the notion of positivism, and then you can think about the kind of relationships between ethics, epistemology, and social theory. For Comte, he was very much a child of the Enlightenment, and more particularly a child of the French Enlightenment. What does that mean? Well, that means that he was in the tradition of Descartes. If you think back to Descartes, Descartes is the one who is looking for reliable knowledge. He's looking for knowledge that is the basis of a correct method and which starts from a reliable starting point. Okay, so that's why for Descartes there's this this search for the cogito. I think therefore I am. And that's going to be the reliable starting point, but we must not forget that he's also looking for a method which allows him to deduce things from that starting point, and so that everything that comes after that point is as reliable as the starting point is. And so clearly this is modeled on mathematics, okay? And it differs quite a lot from what you would have seen, let's say, in early modern English science. I'm thinking of Francis Bacon, people like that, where you have the emphasis on empirical knowledge, and you have the emphasis on cobbling together or bringing together a notion of what generalities across observations might look like. All right, so you have two different kind of starting points here. One that starts with the particulars in the English case, and one which starts from, if you wish, the universals in the French case. And so the development of science through the modern era has those two, and later on we could add a somewhat different German approach to this as well. But you have these things all come together in what we now think of as our modern scientific method. And so Comte is part of that study, that he is trying in a certain sense to bring together the strengths of the English approach with the strengths of the French approach. And he's very much rejecting what we might later on see as the strengths of the German approach, which he will think of as metaphysical. Okay, the German approach really much more focuses on kind of internal forms of life. So you can see someone like Hegel, for example, looking for the Geist, the spirit of something, and trying to figure out how it is that the nature has particular kinds of kind of motivating spirits within it. So, we can leave that to the side for the moment because Comte is not interested in that at all. In fact, he sees the progression of science through history as a progression from theology to metaphysics and ultimately to positivism. And so he believes that he represents the kind of ultimate kind of expression of what true knowledge actually looks like. Now, what is positivism? Positivism, I mean, Comte in part is drawing off of Hume of all people here, so he's drawing off of the English tradition. And what he admires in Hume is Hume's empiricism to begin with, but also his skepticism towards unobservables. If you know your Hume, you remember that Hume is the person who is skeptical about the notion that we can see things in reality, such as causation, such as God, such as the person, all of these things which we believe we just see out there. Hume convinces us basically that no, we don't. What we see are constant conjunctions in the case of causation. We don't see something causing something. We see this happen, then that happen. We don't see God. We don't see the human self either. We see the self-acting, the self-doing, the self, engaged in some way, but we don't see a self behind all of those effects of the self. And so for Hume, he is interested in this, getting at what we see in the world and then what we don't see in the world and what we have to bring to the discussion ourselves. And, Hume does want to talk about those things that we bring to the discussion. Later on in his treatise, he talks about ethics being based on sympathy, for example, sympathy for our fellow humans. And so his ethics is not necessarily reducible to simply a kind of calculus based on the observable world. It's rather based on the notion that we are humans at the end of the day, and we have commonalities with other humans. That's not the way Comte wants to go. I mean, Comte is interested in really being very rigorously empirical, and so that's what positivism. That's the first premise of positivism, that everything is based on positive evidence. In other words, if something cannot be demonstrated with empirically, we don't have a right to assert it. We don't have the right to claim that it's knowledge. And so that's the first part for Comte. But there's more to it than that. Because for Comte, he also holds that there's a kind of reduction of knowledge. If everything is based on the observable, then that means for him that science is the ultimate form of knowledge and really the only form of knowledge. Okay, it's not like there are other forms of knowledge that we may hold, so let's say intuition or something like that. No. None of that counts as knowledge unless you can turn it into something scientifically, positively verifiable. And so for Comte, there's this, there's this very kind of rigorous and rigid sort of notion that everything must be turned into something that's scientifically investigatable. Not only that, but he has a very reductionist approach to science. And so, if we think, for example, that something like ethics, in the social world has a kind of scientific basis to it, and that's something that many Enlightenment thinkers, in fact, did think, that there's kind of the goal of finding out the scientific kind of underpinnings of our social world. What they did not do, those Enlightenment thinkers, was try to reduce that kind of science of society to more basic elements. Okay, they left it at the science of society. They looked for laws that would apply to society. And Comte wants to go further than that. He wants to say, if we're going to talk about ethics, what we need to be able to do is reduce ethics to a more basic level. So let's say sociology. And we need to be able to reduce sociology to a more basic level, which is psychology. And we need to be able to reduce psychology to biology, and biology to chemistry, and chemistry to physics, and physics to mathematics. Ultimately, that's true knowledge, when we are able to reduce things to the most basic levels. And what that implies is that there are not a different set of laws for different levels, different kinds of sciences. There's only one set of laws. Okay? And so for Comte, the search was for the laws that apply both to the natural world and to the social world. I mean, he's very clear about that in his in a later work called A General View of Positivism. First thing he says in the conclusion, let me read to you here, is, "Love then is our principle, order our basis, and progress our end. Such, as the preceding chapters have shown, is the essential character of the system of life which positivism positivism offers for the definite acceptance of society, a system which regulates the whole course of our private and public existence by bringing feeling, reason, and activity into permanent harmony. In this final synthesis, all essential conditions are far more perfectly fulfilled than in any other. Each special element of our nature is more fully developed, and at the same time, the general working of the whole is more coherent. Greater distinctness is given to the truth that the affective elements predominate in our nature. Life in all its actions and thoughts is brought under the control and inspiring influence of social sympathy. And so what you can see Comte saying here is that, you know, there is a kind of social end to this, and this is where our discussion comes into play here, right? I mean, in other cases, in let's say Plato and Aristotle, what we saw is the predominance or priority of, let's say, the ethical or the social world over the scientific world. In other words, if we get our ethical world straight first, then the rest comes. For Comte, it's the other way around, right? If get our scientific world straight first, if we understand what true epistemology looks like, then what follows from that is a well-ordered social world and a well-ordered ethical world. And so, you know, for Comte, that there's a clear directionality to all of this. You know, let's get our science straight first, and then we simply follow the dictates of science, and all will be well. And so, you know, this is a position which, it should be said, was all the rage for some of the 19th century with many people, but not everyone. I mean, we're going to see Mill, for example, writing against positivism. We are going to see positivism extended within philosophy with what we call logical positivism, which was a very kind of anti-metaphysical approach to philosophy. That too fell ultimately. Nobody claims to be a logical positivist anymore, and there were reasons for that. Those reasons I'm not going to tell you quite yet, because that's one of the things I want you to think about. Very few people call themselves positivists anymore. Within philosophy of science, they talk a lot about post-positivism as something which was really as early as the 1950s or 60s. People such as Popper and Quine and others really resisted elements of positivism. And what I want you to think about is why. I mean, doesn't this sound like a reasonable approach to basically be able to say, look, you know, our knowledge proceeds on the basis of positive evidence, and we build it. We can reduce our sciences and we build it up from the bits and pieces. And so ultimately we should have a world governed by science. Does that not sound like a really kind of reasonable and rational approach to things? Moreover, if we give up on that, don't we just have something like relativism? Or don't we have the kind of extremism that we might see within you know, some kind of social theories that people have about things? Let's say theories that are based on, let's say, a religious text or a particular approach to you know, the state or economics or something like that. I mean, don't we have, you know, if we don't take something like positivism seriously, don't we end up with relativism? Or is there some room in the middle? Is there some other thing that we could appeal to that would save us from those kinds of extremes? So that's what I want you to think about. I want you to read the Comte piece, and I want you to, in the comments, see if you can think a little bit about you know, the ways in which ethics, politics, social theory, and epistemology relate under a theory like Comte's. What may be its strengths and weaknesses, and where we might go from here. All right, so take a look at that, and I will be putting up some more videos on the other figures. All right.